Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the. Oh, shoot, is there something on my face, boy? See, that's why you gotta do the mirror visit before you get on camera because you don't want to get caught with stuff on your face like that. But what's up, y'all? My name is Jared Hoffman, and this is another edition of the Better Than Less Than podcast. For those of you who are new here, Better Than Less Than podcast is focused all on the Division II and NAIA HBCUs, all the latest news and hot topics and stories from the Division II and NAIA HBCUs. You will find that on this podcast. You can always watch our other podcasts. We also have the MEAC and More with Chris Stevens, which is focused on the MEAC, and our independent HBCUs at the Division I level, like North Carolina A&T, Hampton, and Tennessee State. His show usually airs on Wednesdays, so always check that out. And then you have the SWAC Page podcast with the big dogs of the HBCU sports team, Kendrick Marshall, and our founder and owner, Ken Rashad. They talk all things SWAC. I know the majority of our fan base is SWAC. So if you need some SWAC content, you could always go to the SWAC Page podcast, which usually airs on Fridays. But here we have the Division II and NAIA HBCUs. We'll be talking about CIAA today. We usually talk about the SIAC also and the HBCUAC and the independent HBCUs at the Division II and NAIA level, like Lincoln, Missouri, West Virginia State, Zula, and more. So thank you all for tuning in. If you can, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. You can subscribe to become a level 1, 2, or 3 member so you can get all the exclusive content from the HBCU sports team. You can follow us on all of our social media platforms. We are on Twitter, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on TikTok, Threads, all of those things, Blue Sky, all of them. Search HBCU Sports and you will find us there. And you can always go to hbcusports.com for all the latest news in HBCU sports. This show is brought to you by the second annual HBCU Sports Rewards, which will be taking place July 26th, live on YouTube and live on Facebook. We will be announcing the nominees soon, so stay tuned for that. So yeah, be tuned in when we're here. When we announce the nominees and look forward to seeing the second annual HBCU Sports Awards live on YouTube and live on Facebook on July 26th. Time is still to be determined. All right. As you can see by the title, we are talking CIAA football. Next week, we will talk about the SIAC and bring you some of the biggest storylines coming out of the SIAC that will be going into the SIAC football season next week. But this week, we talk about CIAA. But first, we have a news item that we have to talk about. Last week we talked about Jamal Gibson, who is the 2-time reigning HBCUAC Player of the Year. He is now transferring from SUNO, previously committed to the University of New Orleans, but he has since flipped to Xavier University of Louisiana. We also talked about Zula last week, or was it 2 weeks ago? I believe it was a long time ago. We talked about Zula making the transition from the Red River Athletic Conference to the Southern States Athletic Conference, and they made a big splash in the recruitment trail ahead of their final season in the Red River Athletic Conference, adding 2-time HBCU Player of the Year Jamal Gibson to their roster. But now they have made yet another splash this offseason by adding. Let's see if it comes up. And boom, there you go. The reigning HBCUAC tournament MVP, Ben Travin Phillips, out of Dillard. Oh, that's a picture of him. That's a better look at him. But let's scroll down. Ben Travin Phillips. He is coming to the. Whoa, this is not sponsored. We don't want that on here. Let's go down. Let's go down further. Shout out to Fashion Nova, shout out to Powerade, but y'all ain't paying us. But we got Ben Travin Phillips making his way to Zula ahead of their final season in the Red River Athletic Conference. Another big splash from the Gold Rush in this offseason. Ben Travin Phillips was the savior of the Dillard tournament championship team this past season. Hit 2 big buckets down the stretch in the tournament championship game, I believe against Philander Smith, if I'm not mistaken, to win the championship game. Was named the tournament MVP, averaging 13 points per game. And during the season, he averaged 13 points per game during the season. During the tournament, I believe I'm not even going to pretend like I know what his averages was during the tournament. I do know that I believe he scored 17 points in the championship game, including the game-winning bucket, the steal and the game-winning bucket to clinch the tournament championship for Dillard. This is another big splash for Zula. They are going after it. They have not won a conference championship since they left the GCAC, which is now the HBCUAC. A lot of us questioned why they decided not to just rejoin the HBCUAC with all the momentum that the HBCUAC is building. They added 2 members of the Red River Athletic Conference to their conference on July 1st. Houston Tillotson and Paul Quinn both officially are now officially members of the HBCUAC from the Red River Athletic Conference. So you would think it was a no-brainer that Zula would join the HBCUAC, rejoin the HBCUAC, the newly formed HBCUAC, but they decided to go a different direction and join this Southern States Athletic Conference, which is a very competitive conference and a definitely one that will test their skills at the NAIA level. But anyway, we want to take the attention from Bentravon Phillips, who is an extraordinary pickup for Zula. He has not been able to stay still. He's bounced from home to home since his collegiate career began. Spent his first 2 seasons at 2 different JUCOs and was a significant scorer at the JUCO level before making his way to Dillard, where he immediately made an impact, helping lead Dillard to a conference tournament championship. And now he will be playing alongside his fellow HBCUAC transfer, Jamal. I almost forgot his name for a second. Jamal Gibson. So a big pickup for Zula. They are definitely going for the championship this year in the Red River Athletic Conference. They're gonna have some trouble in the Red River Athletic Conference. That is a very competitive conference. Featuring LSU Alexandria. For those of you who don't know about LSU Alexandria, they're every year one of the more competitive basketball teams at the NAIA level, men's basketball teams at the NAIA level. And yeah, it's a lot of, it's going to be a lot of competition in the Red River Athletic Conference for for Zula in their final year in the conference, but they're starting off on a high level with 2 top tier HBCUAC transfers now on their roster. So we'll see how that works out for Zula in their final season in the RRAC as they transition. They're prepared to transition toward the SSAC. But yeah, I'm gonna be, my eyes are gonna be glued to the screen watching Zula this season. Jamal Gibson has been, one of the best stories in HBCU basketball in recent memory. If you're not familiar with Jamal Gibson, just type his name on Google and you'll find him. He has made waves out of Southern New Orleans, in the HBCUAC, winning, HBCUAC Player of the Year each of the past 2 seasons, and now he gets the opportunity to, with all due respect to Suno, truly compete for a conference championship. This is the best opportunity he will have to compete for a conference championship. Again, it's in a loaded conference like the Red River Athletic Conference, but this is going to be the best team that he's had. Last year, Zula finished 19-5 in conference play in a competitive Red River Athletic Conference, and he has the tournament MVP in the HBCUAC to go along with him. So in addition to the players that will be returning for Zula next season. So this is going to be his best season to compete. Bentravon Phillips, I'm curious to see how he adjusts to a new home. This is nothing new for him. As I said, this is his 4th school in 4 years. So, we'll see how he adjusts to a new system and a new conference in the Red River Athletic Conference. And yeah, look out for Zula, because I assume even if they don't win, they're going to be very fun to watch. So that was that news item. And now we get to the heart of this video. And as you can see by the title, we are going to be laying out the biggest storylines in the CIAA football ahead of the 2025 CIAA football season. We're going to start from the top of the standings and make our way down. So up, obviously, that means that let's hold on. Let me set it up. That means we are going to start with Virginia Union. Virginia Union, the reigning CIAA champs, they are looking for their third straight CIAA championship, looking to become the first team to do it since a certain team out of Bowie, Maryland, did it. I believe their name was Bowie State University, the Bowie State Bulldogs, but the one thing that Bowie State unfortunately was not able to do was they weren't able to do it in 3 consecutive years. That's one thing that Bowie cannot lay claim to. They have never won 3 CIAA championships in consecutive years. Unfortunately, the COVID pandemic robbed them of the opportunity to be able to do that. And even Winston-Salem State in the early 2010s, when they made it to the Division II national championship, weren't able to do it because the 2013 CIAA championship game was canceled. So they also didn't get the opportunity to win 3 straight CIAA championships. I'd have to look up the last time. I believe it was Winston-Salem State in the 80s. That was the last team to win 3 straight CIAA championships. But I want to be sure of that. But yeah, Virginia Union looking to do something that no team has done in quite a long time. And I'm just fact checking myself here. No, not even Winston-Salem State in the 80s did it. It was Hampton in the 90s. From 92 to 94 is the last team. The last team to win 3 consecutive. Yeah, right. Right. WSU Ram Nation canceled. Absolutely. But yeah, I know all about your history, Winston-Salem WSU Ram Nation. I know y'all repeated 6 times. So we get it. No need to gloat. Don't nobody. We get it. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah. So Virginia Union looking to do something that is in rarefied air for NCAA football, and the biggest storyline with them entering the season is obviously the reigning Black College Football Player of the Year, the reigning CIAA Player of the Year, Jada Byers. He will not be there, and in his place will be the man who has been his primary backup during his time in the CI with Virginia Union, Curtis Allen. So the biggest question that Virginia Union is going to have to answer is Curtis Allen a true full-time starter? That's the biggest question surrounding Virginia Union during the season. Like, it's easy for Curtis Allen. I don't want to say it's easy. It's very difficult to have 100-yard games. And the fact that he did it in a 2-game span back in, I believe it was 2023, when Jada Byers went down with injury. But it's very difficult to do that, especially when you're not getting those first team reps consistently. So but now he is going to be the number 1 guy. He's going to be number 1 on the depth chart. I wouldn't be shocked if he was the preseason player of the year. The CIAA nor any HBCU conference has put out their preseason predicted order of finish and preseason teams and stuff like that. So, and they haven't announced their preseason player of the years, but I would be it's between Dalen Lee and Curtis Allen, but for who's going to be I assume that's who is going to be or maybe even Trayvon Hester. Is that his name? WSU Ram Nation, Trayvon Hester. He could also potentially be the CIAA preseason player of the year. But the point is that Curtis Allen is going to have the keys to the backfield for Virginia Union, and it's going to be whether he's going to be able to carry the torch. Obviously there's other losses that Virginia Union suffered in the offseason, including Isaac Anderson not being there anymore. So that's going to be significant on the defensive side, but everything points to Curtis Allen. Jada Byers was what made the show go. The defense was elite. Don't get me wrong. It was absolutely elite. But oh man. We'll talk about that when we get to Winston-Salem State. So that's unfortunate. I did not know that, So yeah, Unfortunate blow for Salem State, but we'll get to that in a second. So because that yeah, we'll get that in a second. But yeah, so Curtis Allen is gonna have the keys to kingdom, and we'll see if he is not just able to put up big numbers. Because it's one thing just to put up big numbers; it's another thing to be able to produce big numbers and to sway your team toward victory. Obviously, it's more than just Curtis Allen. It was more than just Jada Byers when they were having the success when he was in the lineup. But it he has the weight of the world on his back. Curtis Allen does, filling in as the starting running back for Jada Byers. So the question for Virginia Union is that has their time passed now that Jada Byers is gone? We've seen teams lose their top guy and fall from grace. If you look at the SWAC, you look at Alabama A&M and what they look like without a Quill Glass. Now, of course, that's a quarterback as opposed to a running back, but it's the same concept of your star player is now gone and you're going to have to find a way to move on without him. It's the same thing with Fort Valley State. We've seen them lose star running backs, and you're thinking like, oh, who's going to be the next guy to step up? And they consistently find new guys to fill in that role, whether it be Brandon Marshall, whether it be Emmanuel Wilson, So yeah, and Virginia Union, one thing they will do, they will find a game-changing running back. It was Tavis Taylor before, then it was Jada Byers, and now Curtis Allen has this opportunity to put his name in that lore. So yeah, we'll see if Curtis Allen is able to have that transcendent season and you know find a way to get Virginia Union in rarefied air and win a third straight CIAA championship. So the next team we're going to talk about is the team that Virginia Union beat to claim the CIAA championship, and that is Virginia State. Everyone, for those who weren't paying attention to the CIAA season last year, the CIAA championship game came down to a three-team race. Virginia Union had clinched a spot in the CIAA championship game in the final week of the season. So it came down to Johnson C. Smith and Virginia State. Johnson C. Smith had lost 27-0 to Fayetteville State in week 9, but ahead of the final week of the season. And so that meant that they still needed a win because that game against Fayetteville State, Johnson C. Smith, all they needed to do was win that game and they had clinched a spot in the CIAA championship game. But they lost to Fayetteville State, got shut out against Fayetteville State. And that gave Virginia State a chance to oh, come on. A farce? Come on, that's harsh. Come on, WSU Ram Nation. That's harsh. They was not no farce. They took full advantage of the opportunity that was given to them. They needed to win against Virginia Union, which they did, and they also needed a loss by Johnson C. Smith against Livingstone, and lo and behold, they got that. So Virginia State, snuck in like a thief in the night, beating Virginia Union in the final week and getting a loss from Johnson C. Smith to get in the CIAA championship game. Unfortunately, they were unsuccessful in the CIAA championship game, but just overcame overwhelming odds to clinch a spot in the CIAA championship game. But what WSU Ram Nation just said is kind of my sentiments about Virginia State. What my question for Virginia State, which is, are they truly an elite team in the CIAA? On paper, we're going into the season and saying that the three teams that have the best chance of winning the CIAA this season is Virginia Union, Johnson C. Smith, and Virginia State. And that's because they're just levels ahead of everybody else in the CIAA. Winston-Salem State could potentially be a sleeper. So could Livingstone. So could Shaw be a sleeper in the CIAA this season. But the question is Virginia State truly a contender for the CIAA championship this year? Or was last year fool's gold and they aren't as elite as we think they are? Because you look at how the season ended for them last season, losing in the CIAA championship game, they did not look the same in that week 10 game against Virginia Union compared to a week later. In the yes, WSU did beat Virginia State on the road. They beat them on the road. So now, so that's going to be the question for Virginia State. Are they truly an elite team, or are they just better than the field? Being better than the field is not going to get you back to the CIAA championship game. They have to separate themselves from the pack and get themselves on the same level as Johnson C. Smith and Virginia Union. Because I'm gonna be honest with you, I didn't think that they were a better team than Johnson C. Smith last year. They lost to Johnson C. Smith last year. So they'll have their chance to prove that whether or not they are on that same level. But that's going to be the question for them, because we're going into the season saying that they are a part of the three teams that we think have the best chance of winning the CIAA. But there could also be a chance that they're just better than the bottom of the barrel. They being in the CIAA North, that your only true competition is Virginia Union. That hurts me to say because I'm a Bowie State guy, but your only true competition in the CIAA North is Virginia Union. And you got, I don't want to say you got lucky, but you peaked at the right time, beating Virginia Union in the final week of the season to get into the CIAA championship game. Now is your time to prove that was not any fluke. That was not you peaking at the right time. That is the standard for you. That is your norm, and you will be a player in the CIAA championship race. So we'll see if Virginia State can blow up the system in the CIAA and potentially prove that they should be one of the favorites to win in the CIAA. Next up, we got the team that got passed up by Virginia State to make it to the CIAA championship game, and that is Johnson C. Smith. Again, Johnson C. Smith went into week 9 of the season 8-0. They had to win just one. They only needed to win one game to make it into the CIAA championship game. Had their worst performance of the season against Fayetteville State, meaning they went into a must-win situation, as opposed to if they would have won that game against Fayetteville State, they could have just rested their starters and prepared themselves for the CIAA championship game. But lost to Fayetteville State, went into week 10 needing a win, and they lost against Livingstone. Jesus, WSU Ram Nation, we get it. Yes, Johnson C. Smith didn't have the end of the season that they wanted. But one thing we can say about Johnson C. Smith is that they went into this offseason with a vengeance. They have completely turned around this roster, even more than what it already was. They were already a dominant team last year, and they've retooled like you wouldn't believe. They added Kelvin Durham, which is remarkable because they already had a star quarterback in Darius Ocean, who was an all CIAA selection last year, and then they added Armand Harris, the 1,000-yard receiver from Clark Atlanta, to pair with the guy who had 1,000 yards last year in Brevin Caldwell. So, and then you got Kamaro Edmonds, who was a solid running back for them. So they come into this season with a loaded offense. The biggest question for Johnson C. Smith is this just a paper champion, or are they the class of the CIAA? That's going to be the biggest question that they're going to have to answer. We're looking at this roster on paper, and I'm expecting dominance. I'm going to just be quite honest with you. I'm expecting dominance. They are my favorite going into the season. That's what we're going to have to see. That's what we're going to have to see with Johnson C. Smith. Can they handle the expectations that are being laid at their feet? I'm expecting dominance from Johnson C. Smith. I'm being quite honest with you. I would not be surprised if they finished the regular season undefeated. But the biggest problem that they have this year is that they play Virginia Union on the road and they play Virginia State on the road. Their two biggest competitors, they both play them on the road. And I believe I'm gonna go to their schedule real quick, but I believe play Winston-Salem State on the road, if I'm not mistaken. Or was that last year that they played Winston? No, they played Winston-Salem State at home. It's Fayetteville State that they play on the road. So three of your biggest the team that you got shut out by last year, Fayetteville State, you play them on the road. You play Virginia State on the road, and you play Virginia Union on the road. That's a problem. On paper, your team looks like one of the best we will see in recent memory. It looks like a team that is going to be in the history books as one of the most dominant seasons in HBCU football history in general, Division I or Division II. The question is, are they paper champions or are they real champions? We'll just have to see. They had lofty expectations going into week 9. The weight of the world was on their shoulders in that game against Fayetteville State, and they dropped the ball worse than a team could possibly drop the ball, losing in a shutout which, if you could believe it, the score does not indicate how bad they lost that game. They were horrible in that game. They were horrible. They played a little bit better against Livingstone, but it wasn't enough for them to win. And now we're going to have to see whether or not Johnson C. Smith can take the expectations that are being placed on them and actually deliver this time. Here you go, WSU Ram Nation. Talk about this great birthday present. Get out of here, man. I need Johnson C. Smith to beat them just so they can stop this talk from WSU Ram Nation on their hype. Hey, look, the talent on paper is worth the hype, if you ask me. The talent on paper, this looks like an offense that should set records, that should rewrite the history book in the CIAA, let alone for Johnson C. Smith. So we'll just have to wait and see whether or not they're all hype or whether they are able to overcome the adversity that they put on themselves. They put this adversity on themselves. They needed just to win one game to make it to the championship game, and they couldn't do it. They have one of all the teams in the CIAA. I believe they have. I could be wrong about this. I believe they have the longest drought without a CIAA championship, because I believe Elizabeth City State. They last won in the 2000s, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong about that. It could have just been that they made it to the championship game, but I believe Elizabeth City State. No, I'm pretty sure I'm very wrong about that. I don't even remember the last time Elizabeth City State has won a CIAA championship. But yeah, I believe Johnson C. Smith has one of the longest droughts. Lincoln only joined the conference in 2009, so. Oh, yeah. So yeah, Johnson C. Smith has the longest drought in the CIAA because Livingstone won in the 90s. We all know about Winston-Salem State. Shaw won a couple in the early 2010s. So yeah, they're going into it as possibly the prohibitive favorite. Of course, Virginia Union's the team to beat because they're the reigning champions. But with this roster, there's no question that they are the favorite to win it this year. And we'll have to see if they're able to manage those expectations and take this team over the top and win a championship this year. But enough of Johnson C. Smith there. We're going to get to our next team, which is, and it's funny that WSU Ram Nation is in the chat because we have Winston-Salem State. Now, Winston-Salem State had a rejuvenation this past season. They had their first winning season in, I believe, 6 years, since 2018. 6 or 7 years. Since 2018. They had not had a winning season since 2018. The Robert Massey era was you could see the steady improvements within Winston-Salem State, but they finally were able to put it together, and they finished 7-3 last year. But now with the news that Trayvon Hester is potentially going to be out for the season, that lays a lot now at the feet of Dalen Lee. So now the question is that can Dalen Lee, the focus shifts to can Dalen Lee have a CIAA Player of the Year caliber season? And WSU Ram Nation says that they lost some key defenders. I'm gonna need to watch some of that WSU Ram Nation content so I can get more insight into Winston-Salem State this upcoming season. I'm pretty sure we're going to learn a little bit more about Winston-Salem State once CIAA Media Day comes around, which is, I believe, in a week or so. So, yeah, as you outlined, Dalen Lee and his receivers are going to have to step up. So, this is uncharted territory for Winston-Salem State. This is probably the longest they've gone without appearing in the CIAA championship game since the CIAA championship game was established. You know, this is new for Winston-Salem State. They're not used to not appearing in the CIAA championship game. The longest time they went without being in the CIAA championship game was when they weren't in the conference, when they were in the MEAC for a couple of years. So, yeah, it is the longest. So, and I know WSU Ram Nation, he want to talk all that trash about everybody else. I know he's starving to get his team back in the CIAA championship game. So the question that there's going to be a lot of weight that Dalen Lee is going to have to carry with now your main backfield threat and Trayvon Hester, who will potentially be out for the season. There's going to be a lot of weight on him to power this team to championship contention. You know, and then you already have that the three teams at the top of Johnson C. Smith, Virginia Union, and Virginia State are going to be in the picture as well. You know, so and it really hurts because Winston-Salem State gave those teams some good run last year. They gave Johnson C. Smith a competitive game last year. They beat Virginia State last year, and don't remember what happened against Virginia Union, if they even played Virginia Union, but it does help that they do have Virginia Union and Virginia State and on their home field, you know, so, but I don't know if the talent level between those teams is going to be enough to get them over the top. That's going to be the question that Winston-Salem State is going to have to answer is, can they overcome the talent gap between them and the teams at the top of the conference in order to get themselves back into the CIAA championship picture? And Dalen Lee, you trust, and in Dalen Lee, Robert Massey trusts because he spoke very highly of him. I spoke to him a couple of weeks ago, live on the show about it, as a matter of fact. And he said that he believes that Dalen Lee is one of, if not the best quarterback in HBCU football. And that's very high praise because we have some significant quarterback talent in HBCU football. So we'll see if Dalen Lee is truly what his coach says he is and what WSU Ram Nation says he is. If he is able to to make those plays needed to get Winston-Salem State into the championship picture. You know, so that's one of the bubble teams in the CIAA this season. The other bubble team that I believe could potentially muck some things up in the CIAA is Livingstone. And I said muck, M-U-C-K. I'm not cussing on here. Livingstone last year played spoilers. Johnson C. Smith beat them in the final week of the season to keep them from appearing in the CIAA championship game. And I think they were one of the more improved teams along with Winston-Salem State last season. And I think that they or Winston-Salem State could play spoiler this season. My question for Livingstone is, how good is that defense? That's my question for Livingstone this season. But all their guys hit the portal. Man, I need to catch up because I've been trying to look. I've been trying to look and see if their top guys were still there, but it's hard to find a lot of our Division II guys. Will any? Interesting question. We'll get that in a second. But Livingstone, my question for them is: are they ready to take that next step into becoming a CIAA championship contender? And how good can their defense be this season? You know, we'll see who's on the field for them this upcoming year. Their defense was a big part of why uh, they were as improved as they were. You know, Kevin Larkin's coming back from a, a year away with the team. Mysterious what happened to him in that year off. I couldn't find anything about where he was, excuse me, where he played in that year off, or even if he did play in that year off. I know I saw that he had committed to the University of Kentucky, but I didn't see that he appeared in any games for Kentucky. So, but anyway, that's not the point. The point is that he's back. He was back with the team last year, and he was a big part of why they were so improved last year. And it really showed that Livingstone has a chance to take that next step and take their game to another level and become a contender for the first time in a long time. It's been a very, very long time since Livingstone was a true contender in the CIAA, and I think that they have a chance to pull off some upsets and maybe even put themselves in position to clinch a spot in the CIAA championship this year. But the question is, how good is their defense? Will the talent that they lost in the portal, will that hurt them in the long run, or can they find those guys that were maybe didn't get as much run in the lineup last year, or guys who are incoming to step up and fill those roles and potentially, you know, like I said, put themselves in contention for the CIAA this year, you know? So, and then we have it, honestly, well, let's talk about Shaw, because I feel like Shaw could potentially be a team that, because I was going to talk about the field, because everybody else in the CIAA, I don't think that there's much of a, I don't think there's much of a silver lining for the bottom tier teams in the CIAA. I think that you have your top three teams of Johnson C. Smith, Virginia State, and Virginia Union, and then you have your sleepers, which are Livingstone, Winston-Salem State, and Shaw. So I was debating whether I wanted to put Shaw within the field or whether I wanted to put Shaw on that bubble with Livingstone and Winston-Salem State. But I'll give them that respect and put them on the bubble, even though they've kind of hurt me in the past, because I've been saying for a long time, and I'm going to continue to repeat this, where Virginia Union is right now, that's where I expected Shaw to be. I've been saying that for years. When they had Sidney Gibbs, when they had an actual defense that can go with it. Unfortunate, Devon Hunt, who was a star linebacker for them back in the late 2010s, going into 2020s, he got hurt and he had to miss a year, and actually came back and had a solid season for them in 2019 and 2021. So, but their growth has seemingly been stalled. And my question for Shaw going into this season is this the year that they finally show some resemblance of being a championship contender? They actually started the season last year great. They had a great start to the season last year. You know, they had an impressive win against Albany State, overcoming I believe a 2 or 3 touchdown deficit against Albany State, and were able to get a win over them in what was one of the best games of the year last year in all of HBCU football. You know, but after that, they just weren't able to really take that next step into contendership. And my question is, you know, when are they going to finally realize their potential? You know, they've shown good potential for a long time now, but it just seems that always Fayetteville State was always in their way back when there was a CIAA South. You know, it seemed like they couldn't get over that hump and win the CIAA South. And now that there are no divisions, you know, they can't get over those top teams in the CIAA. They got trounced by Virginia Union last year. They lost to Fayetteville. Well, I believe they beat Fayetteville State last year, if I'm not mistaken. I could be misremembering that, but the top teams in the CIAA, Johnson C. Smith beat them badly. So it's just it, it, it it's just curious, when are they gonna really realize their full potential and become the CIAA contender that I expected them to be by now. I expected them to be there by now. They have a coach that they have entrusted in, and they since moved on from him now. They got Lamar Manigo there. So is Lamar Manigo the guy to get them over the top? That's the question. Is Lamar Manigo the right guy to get them over the top? They did it for a long time with their previous coach. Now they got a new guy in there. Is that the move that they needed to finally get themselves over the top? I honestly feel like this is a good chance for them to potentially put themselves in to finally realize their potential and make it to the CIAA championship game, just because with Virginia Union, you have a completely different roster with Virginia Union. There's a lot of unknowns with Virginia Union. There's a lot of unknowns with Virginia State, and whether or not they are truly a contender, or whether or not they benefited from a monumental collapse from Johnson C. Smith. There's a lot of questions surrounding Winston-Salem State. They've been ravaged by injuries. Some of their top defensive talent is now gone. Livingstone, their offense is questionable, as good as their defense looks on paper. So this is a good season for Shaw to potentially play spoiler and put themselves in contention for the CIAA championship berth. But that's why we play the games, because talent and expectations go out the window once you step on that field. So we'll see if Shaw can finally put themselves and put their name in the hat for the CIAA championship. But yeah, we'll just have to wait and see. And now there's no reason to really highlight the remaining teams, because I don't really expect the rest of the teams to really be a contender. But my question for the remaining teams is, who is truly the best of the field, and who has the best chance to make me look stupid and prove me wrong? WSU Ram Nason said he feels like FSU might have a bounce back year, and Bowie could be a spoiler. I would love that. Bowie has arguably one of the top returning quarterbacks for going into the season, who had his name escapes me, so I'm trying to remember what his name is, but he had a solid into the season last year. I think it's I don't want to guess. I just want to look it up to see what it is. But Kevin Taylor. See, I was going to say Kevin, but is it Kevin Taylor or Jordan Morris? I think it's Kevin Taylor that was the one that had the solid season down the stretch. But yeah, he's a guy that I believe could be a transcendent star going into this season. Michael Robinson, I don't know if he's still there, but if he's still there, he could be an X factor for Bowie. They lost they have lost a lot of significant defensive talent over the past couple of seasons. Jesus, the brother, what's his name? The defensive back. Jesus, I can't remember his name, but they've lost, especially in their secondary. They've lost a lot of talent in their secondary over the past couple of seasons. So it could either be Fayetteville State or Bowie State that I believe could be the best of the best of the rest, or the best of the field, for lack of better words. But yeah, I'm curious to see the improvements for Elizabeth City State. A couple of years ago, they played spoiler to Virginia State, similar to how Livingstone played spoiler to Johnson C. Smith. Beating them in the penultimate week of the season to keep them out of the CIAA championship game in 2023. And Elizabeth City State has just not been able to put it together. They're another team that has a new coach coming in. So, excuse me, we'll see if the change of leadership could give them a little bit of life going into the 2025 season. But yeah, outside of the top six, outside of Union State, Johnson C. Smith, Winston-Salem State, Livingstone, and Shaw, I don't truly think that there's a contender out of the rest of the bunch. We'll see if Fayetteville State can have a bounce back year. I was saying that all year last year that the most dangerous thing about Fayetteville State, it doesn't matter how they play through the first three quarters, because they always find a way to make the plays that matter in that fourth quarter in order to win. So Fayetteville State is always a tough out, whether they have a down year or whether they're a top contender in the CIAA. They're always going to be a tough out. The question is, can they get themselves back in championship contention? Last year was rare for them. They ended a streak of, 7 straight years of appearing in the CIAA championship game. So in the first year without divisions. So they're going to have to adjust to this being a no division conference. Every team had to last year, but especially Fayetteville State, who only knew one thing, which was dominance within the CIAA South. Now that there are no divisions, and it's anybody's game to get to this to CIAA championship game. So yeah, those are your big storylines in CIAA football. Looking forward to the start of the CIAA season. Looking forward to CIAA Media Day so we can hear from the coaches and players of these respective teams and get their perspective of what their mindset is going to be going into the 2025 HBCU football season. And looking forward to the kickoff. And we'll have a couple of CIAA versus SIAC matchups to start the season. In week 1, we'll have Union going up against Miles in a matchup of reigning division champions in the Black College Football Hall of Fame Classic, and Winston-Salem State will be playing against Tuskegee in the Red Tails Classic. That'll be Sunday, August 31st. So yeah, I'm just really looking forward to the start of the 2025 HBCU football season. But those are my biggest storylines for the CIAA football season. And stay tuned next week where we will be looking at all the biggest storylines in the SIAC football season. Until then, I've been Jared Hoffman. Thank you all for tuning in to this edition of the Better Than Less Than podcast. Again, can you please leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the HBCU Sports YouTube channel. Please subscribe to become a level 1, 2, or 3 member so you can get all the exclusive content from the HBCU Sports team. You can follow us on all of our social media platforms. We are on Twitter. We are on Facebook. We're on Instagram. We're on Threads. We're on Blue Sky. Search HBCU Sports and we will be there. And you can always go to, I say this so many times that you would think I would have it down pat by now. You can always go to hbcusports.com for all the latest news in sports, HBCU sports. And once again, the HBCU Sports Awards are going down on July 26th. We will be announcing the nominees very, very soon. So please stay tuned and be in tune on July 26th live on YouTube and live on Facebook to the 2nd annual HBCU Sports Awards. Thank you all again. And until next time, see you guys.